Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to be covering my build for Thunder Cage as well as going over a good early and mid game setup for the gun. And I'm going to showcase a couple different arcade tech mods that I think work really well with this weapon. It's a little bit of a longer video, so down below I will have timestamped the early, mid, mobbing, and bossing setup for the gun, so wherever you happen to be in the game, just feel free to skip ahead to those points. So let's go ahead and get into it. First off, with the gun and kind of what you want to get for attributes on it. Number one is going to be firearm attack. Number two is going to be firearm critical hit rate, and number three is going to be firearm critical hit damage. Those are going to be the three most important things you want to roll on the gun. This probably took me about 200 of those little reroll modules in order to attain this. Hopefully you have a little bit better luck than I did. As for the fourth one on here, I chose weak point damage. I feel like this is the most beneficial to the gun since you spend a lot of time shooting bosses' weak points with this. However, you could go with an elemental roll here, such as toxic or fire or chill. Or you could also just go with a larger weapon magazine. That fourth one's going to be up to you. The first three that are the most important are going to be the firearm attack, the critical hit rate, and the critical hit damage on the gun. So let's go ahead and get into the mods here on the gun. If you just came here for the big flex number, 641,000 DPS is what we got on the weapon for the max. I'll come back to this a little bit later in the video. First, I want to focus on the early and mid game setup. This right here is what I believe to be probably the most optimal early game setup for the gun. This is assuming you do not have an energy activator in here and that your module capacity is maxed out at 50 and you only have the two slots that come catalyzed initially with a weapon. That's going to be this one right here, this cerulean, and this malachite slot right here. So what I would build into it is action and reaction, rifling reinforcement, fire rate up, and then I personally like expand weapon charge. The reason being is because the gun comes with kind of a bad reload stat, especially considering that the unique ability gives us a negative 30% reload multiplier on the weapon when you first initially get it. So I like to have a couple more bullets in the magazine just for a little bit of quality of life. But that's how I would build the gun. Initially, we're sitting at about 277,000 DPS. And as for our module capacity, we're sitting at about 44 out of 50. Again, mine's fully formatted, so it's going to be a little bit different than your guys's because I have these slots already catalyzed. But the total capacity you'd be at is about 44 out of 50 with a brand new gun. I also recommend that you just invest in a couple high-level mods. As you can see, I have these all maxed out right here. That's how exactly I would build mine in the early game. I don't really recommend putting on a bunch of low-level mods because it just lowers the overall DPS of the weapon, as well as just kinds of, you don't get that much benefit in the stats over here. So as we move more into the mid-game, the two mods you're going to want to put on are going to be better insight and better concentration. These would be the next most important things I would put on the weapon. Just going to give you a big boost to the DPS. It's going to increase our critical hit rate up to 27%, critical hit damage up to almost 3.5x. So from there, we're going to add in two more mods. We're going to add in concentration priority and some kind of reload modifier. The reason being is because concentration priority gives us a negative 30% reload time modifier. So if you don't happen to invest in any kind of reload stat right here, you're going to have a 1.82 second reload time on top of the other negative 30% that you would have with the weapon if you do not have it fully maxed out and you haven't invested 4 additional thunder cages into the gun. So definitely recommend putting at least one reload type mod on the gun. You can use any of these reload mods right here: reload insight, reload focus, consume magazine. I personally just like this one because it's a blue mod and it's fairly cheap. So this is pretty much where I would leave it at for a mid-game setup for the gun, sitting at about 540,000, 27% crit hit rate, and about 5.9 on the critical hit damage multiplier. Now, I'll go over why I have these two slots catalyzed the way that I do. However, you do have a couple options here from this point on the gun. Personally, I like to have this slot right here catalyzed as a cerulean because it allows me a lot of flexibility to put in either more rounds in the magazine, or I can add in additional reload time to the gun, and I can still also fit the chill enhancement here as well too for some kind of elemental damage. So that's personally how I like to have the gun set up. You could, however, add in insight focus into the gun here at this point, and you could form this slot for the almudine, which is this right here, the A's. And you could leave this last slot right here empty, which would allow you to flex in things like electric, toxic, fire, or chill for the elemental attack on the gun, or you could put in more reload or a larger magazine into this slot right here if you leave it uncatalyzed. But that's all going to be personal preference. Another mod that's really popular that people are using is firing Fiesta right here. Just causes your gun to not consume rounds for 3 seconds after you reload. As you level this up, it just reduces the cooldown time. Now, as for my personal setup on the gun, what I like to use for my mobbing is going to be pretty much similar to the early and mid-game setup that I have. We're still using action and reaction, fire our rate up, expand weapon charge, concentration priority, reload insight, better concentration, better insight, rifling reinforcement. And then we're using Recycling Genius here. You do have a lot of flexibility in what you can put here. If you want faster reload time, go with Recycling Genius. If you want more rounds in your magazine, go with Insight Support. If you want some elemental damage, you can throw on Chill right here. That's going to be, again, kind of personal preference, and you can flex it out for whatever you like. The big mod that we want to use on this, though, for our mobbing setup is going to be Sweeping Squads. And it states when defeating an enemy, we get a firearm attack increase of 10.6% for 5 seconds at a 100% chance, stacking up to 3 times. Now, I just want to showcase that here. So if we actually go through, whether we kill something with our gun or we kill it with our abilities, we are getting a stack of that buff. So as you can see, we're at 3 right there. So that's one of the reasons I like that mod specifically, is because no matter what we kill, as long as we're killing something, we're getting a buff to our firearm attack. So it works really well in most mobbing setups. It's also good on things like Dead Bride, who has a very small weak point to hit. So you could use this in place of the mod that I have set up for the Bosing setup. But that's what I would set up for mobbing. Again, you have a lot of flexibility with the Cerulean slot right here, whether it be a larger mag, reload, or the chill enhancement down there. As for the Bosing setup, sitting about 600k here for this. Again, almost identical to the mobbing setup. Again, we can flex out the reload here for something like larger magazine. That's going to be personal preference. You could also put chill on there if you're fighting a boss like Pyro. And then our big mod that we have on this is going to be Real Life Fighter. And this gives us a firearm attack of 10% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 10 times, for a total of 100% increased firearm attack damage whenever we hit a weak point. You do lose 2 stacks on each failed weak point attack, but because this is a submachine gun, it stacks up very quickly. Just want to go ahead and show you kind of what it does here, so you can see it for yourself. So we'll just spawn this Vulgus in here. And so we'll see the base weak point damage is going to be 45. Well, if it doesn't crit every single time, we'll see. So 45,000 for the base, and then as we stack it up, it caps out at 68,148. Obviously, you can see the crits. They're hitting for about 450,000. Now, like I said, if you happen to miss the weak point, as you can see, the buff goes down, but it's fairly easy to stack up, and that's why I think it's really great on bosses that have large weak points, because it's very easy to keep that buff going for the entirety of the fight. So that would be my personal recommendation on any boss fight that has a relatively large weak point. Personally, I use this on every fight except for Dead Bride. And then if you just want to build mostly into critical hit damage, you can also throw Insight Focus on here. I would just reformat this slot to something else like the Almadine, and you could drop this Recycling Genius for pretty much whatever else you wanted. Again, these 2 slots right here are kind of going to be personal preference. You could throw something like Firing Fiesta into that slot. Obviously, we can't fit it on there because ours are formatted differently, but you could throw Firing Fiesta on there with Insight Focus. That's going to be another option that you guys can do as well too. So again, that's going to just kind of be personal preference for those. If you guys have any questions about how to mod the gun, or any comments about how I have anything set up here, or any questions, feel free to drop a comment down below. Otherwise, appreciate you guys watching. Have a good day.